Hello everyone, welcome to Zeng This, Star Wars special on episode 1, The Phantom Menace. You've got me, Darth Zenger,
Viceroy Ellie,
Rob 2D2,
and we're going to be discussing episode 1, The Phantom Menace. So, just to get started off, of course, we are, as we've stated before, doing this in, of course, order of how they, quote-unquote, happened. So that's the order we have decided to do this in. We're not saying this is the right order to watch them in or anything like that.
We just think it's the easiest way to remember, oh wait, the next episode will be this movie.
Also, this does benefit us because a certain movie in this is not out yet for free to watch. So with that, we are going to begin by discussing the overall plot of episode 1, The Phantom Menace.
Yes. Okay. Well, I will start. So there's two Jedis, and they're sent to try to end the trade blockade.
There's a trade embargo or blockade on the planet Naboo.
Right.
So two Jedis are sent by by Supreme Chancellor Valorum. The two Jedis are, of course, Obi-Wan Kenobi, which, as Star Wars fans, we are all familiar with to see, and his master, Qui-Gon Jinn, which we are not familiar to see, but he's played by Liam Neeson. Just wanted to point that out. We're not going to really discuss actors too much in this.
Right.
But I just want to say I think he did a phenomenal job in this because he just sold this role for me wholeheartedly.
Right.
In my opinion. So
you might say that the role was taken.
Womp womp. Only Star Wars references.
Yeah, and then they find out that there might be something afoot.
Yes, there seems to be a sinister plot afoot.
Yes.
Which leads them to be put down a course on the planet Naboo, where they run into
A refugee outcast who's been banished from his civilization and the true hero of Star Wars, everyone's favorite character, of course.
Jar Jar Binks.
Yes. I'm sure we'll have a little bit more on that in the discussion.
Yes.
I think, it kind of hits the ground running. There is a little bit of exposition, I feel, here and there at this point to kind of sort of get you all caught up on it. But this, once again, this is the first Star Wars movie that everyone would have seen new Star Wars movie everyone would have seen in years, mind you. Because we're going into this also assuming that a lot of people listening to this grew up watching the original trilogy.
4, 5, and 6.
So this would have been the first theater experience to see these movies, which I think it got off to a decent start. You had a little bit of lightsaber fighting against some droids, which was pretty cool to start off with.
Started off running, but it went sprinting as soon as Jar Jar came into play, which is where we're at now.
So he takes them to Gungan City, where, of course, it's pointed out that he has been banished and that the Gungans do not have a very cohesive relationship with the Naboo, who are the humanoids on the planet.
Right.
It is then shown that the invasion, of course, has begun. There's a blockade. They're after Princess Amidala.
Queen Amidala.
Queen Amidala. My bad. I was thinking Princess Leia for some reason. Don't know why.
Because she's awesome.
Of course. So they're after her to try to get her to sign a treaty to make all this legal.
Right.
Now, behind the scenes, of course, we are shown that they are being led by some dark figure who is going by Darth Sidious, which, as we all know, will eventually become Palpatine, or who is Palpatine and will eventually become Emperor Palpatine, which I think that, once again, will lead into a further discussion later. Now, after this point, the Jedi meet up with Queen Amidala and help her escape. Once they escape, they are, of course, damaged. The ship is damaged as they run the blockade, whereby only one single R2-D2 unit is able to save the day, which, of course, is R2-D2.
Well, and the problem is they don't have any money.
Yes.
So how are they going to pay for these repairs?
Well, since they're near the Outer Rim, they, of course, end up on a planet called Tatooine, which, once again, is something familiar to us. Now, they, of course, meet a young boy by the name of Anakin Skywalker. Now, it is eventually pointed out to Qui-Gon, who has taken a very huge interest in the child, that he is without a father, it seems, but has a high midichlorian count, which we
Right.
will get to after that.
He also knows how to pod race.
Yes, after that, there's a pod
Crucial
race.
plot point.
There's a pod race where multiple bets are made on basically Anakin's freedom, as well as money, as well as a new hyperdrive, as well as many, many other things.
And
Freedom.
if you ever played the N64 pod racing game, the scene was worth it just for that.
Yes, it definitely. I guess there's a mixed bag on the pod race, whether you liked it or you didn't. Once again, we will discuss that further momentarily. After that, it is pointed out that the Dark Lord Sidious has, of course, sent his apprentice, Darth Maul, to deal with the situation because he doesn't feel that the Trade Federation is able to handle it. So he's sent to Tatooine to try to follow them. There is a battle there real quick between Qui-Gon and Sith Apprentice, who is Darth Maul. They, of course, escape and eventually make it to the capital planet of Coruscant. Now, while on Coruscant, there is a ton of debate in the Senate over this whole situation, and it seems that there's nothing that's going to be done. So with nothing being... I'm very much cliff noting now. With nothing being done, Padme decides to head back to her planet to try to fight them on her own with the help of hopefully the help of the Gungan because of Jar Jar's recommendation. Another thing that happens during this time is Anakin is told that he is not to forego the Jedi training, but that he possibly could be the chosen one. Qui-Gon Jinn, of course, does not agree with this and kind of says he's going to train the child on his own. And, of course, the Jedi Council is like, nope. So
Yeah, they definitely forbid it.
Yes. They, of course, head back now to Naboo, where they somehow slip through the blockade with no problem, even though when they were escaping, they almost got blown to bits.
Right.
Just kind of a little note there. So they're able to mount a two-pronged attack of where the Naboo are able to send ships out of their own to attack the Federation ships in space, and the Gungans attack on a ground warfare against the robot army. Actually, a three-pronged attack. Sorry.
Let's not forget how they got the Gungans on their side, because there is a plot twist in the script.
Oh, yes. There's been Queen, and then there's been...
Padme, who's a servant of some kind.
Yeah. There's Padme, who is the actual queen, and then there's Queen Amidala, who's been one of her decoys the whole time. So it's revealed that she's been in that place the whole time, and there's a three-pronged attack going on. One where they send Naboo fighters into space. One where the Gungans are fighting them in basically a face-to-face in battle against the droid army. And then another one where they're infiltrating the castle with the Jedi. Jedi, of course, get distracted by the Dark Assassin or the Apprentice that has been sent. And they have an epic battle there, which, of course, ends with Qui-Gon being killed, as well as Darth Maul, quote-unquote, dying. I use quotation fingers because, of course, since Clone Wars and Rebels are in canon, it is revealed later that he actually lived. Moving on, Anakin's basically the key to them winning this battle because as he flew up into space, he was able to shoot down one of the Trade Federation ships, or the main ship that they had, and was able to basically deactivate the robots. At the end, the newly crowned Supreme Chancellor Palpatine shows up to congratulate them. Because while this was all going on, he was able to do a vote of non-confidence against Chancellor Valorum. So I think that kind of wraps it up. Oh, and finally, it is revealed that Sith there's always two of them, a Master and the Apprentice, which one was dead. And it is also shown that Anakin will undergo the training as Obi-Wan as his master. As the dying wish
I was going to say, because
of Qui-Gon Jinn.
Yes, exactly.
So with that being a very quick plot point done, how do you guys think all this works?
In all honesty, the layout of the story it's a good story.
I will agree with that. I think the layout's good. I think certain points of it aren't the best. I know one that a lot of people get hung up on, though, is the Senate stuff. And I kind of want to mention that real quick since we're on plot,
Well, let's get nostalgic for a second and remember the time period this movie came out. And it had been a good chunk of time since there was a Star Wars movie. First reactions to seeing the movie in general. We get into the finer points of what works and what hasn't worked over the test of time. But initial reaction, I loved episode 1. I was so happy there was a new Star Wars movie. I would have watched it 30 times if I hadn't have been in a movie theater.
I was excited because it had been such a long time. So I was pretty excited. The initial impression, I thought it was all right. I wasn't like that was the best Star Wars movie ever made. It was entertaining enough at the time.
I mean, I was younger when I saw it. I'll admit that.
Yes, me too.
I enjoyed it, but as the test of time, and I'm sure a later discussion here will tell you, I don't think it's bad, but I kind of have my nitpicks.
Wish you could tell the same story, but do it a little bit differently.
All right, we're going to move into characters now, kind of discussing the different characters, and this is where we'll probably discuss a certain one. I really liked all the characters in this. I mean, excluding the ones that I'm sure we'll all mention in a second. I thought it was very interesting. I don't want to talk too much on the actors. I kind of want to look at this as the actual movie and not as the individual actors of it. But I think it was very interesting that Ian McDiarmid reprised his role of Palpatine that he had originally played in Return of the Jedi and then was later re-put into Empire. So he reprised his role as Palpatine, which is pretty interesting considering there is a good chunk of time there in between the two. Mm-hmm. So that was pretty cool. Liam Neeson, as I said, I think did a phenomenal job in this movie. And Hugh McGregor is, I think, the shining gold example of just great acting throughout the entire prequel trilogy. So that's kind of, I guess that's my little note on actors. Now, as for characters, I'm going to say that a lot of the characters in this were kind of pointed at certain demographics. I feel that's why Jar Jar Binks was the way he was. He was something put in there by George Lucas or by, whoever was developing this at the time, mainly Lucas, to pander to children and to try to get kids excited about this and to sell merchandise on.
He was kind of like the comic relief, just wasn't, I mean, I guess, like, maybe if you're, 8 and saw the movie, you might find Jar Jar funny.
I mean, he's just there now for me in the movie. His character does what he needs to, and it's sort of like he's annoying, but he's there and he progresses the story plots that he needs to.
I mean, he's become a cultural icon.
For better or for worse. Ellie, your thoughts on the characters in this movie?
I liked what some of the characters represented. Mm-hmm. Like Queen Amidala there were a couple really strong female characters, but Queen Amidala was one that I think about because she was the type of queen that she was willing to get her hands dirty. She wasn't the sit on the throne and be more of a figurehead.
Yeah,
she actually, disguised herself and pretended like she was the, what do they call it? The, I can't remember.
Handmaiden?
Yes. But I like the way, she could have stayed back on the ship, but then when they went to the...
Where they were on Tatooine and went to go try to get the parts they needed for the ship, such as the hyperdrive and stuff like that.
She could have stayed back on the ship, but, she chose to...
Now, do you feel she was doing that more for she wanted to make sure it was getting done correctly, or because she wanted to be a part of that situation?
I mean, I think a little bit of both.
Yeah.
She wanted to be helpful and she wanted to get out there. And so I respected her for that. The same thing with Anakin's mom, and I always say her name. Is it Shmi?
Shmi Skywalker.
Shmi, just that eternal sacrifice of, she obviously would have loved to have Anakin stay with her, but she knew that it was best to give him up so that he could lead a better life. And I also like Watto, because he kind of represented, it's kind of pointed out that he may have had a disability. because of his one leg was shorter than the other, and he flew because he was
Constantly.
Yeah, he constantly flew because he wouldn't have been able to walk very well.
I've never heard that.
Yeah.
I was.
And
Interesting.
one of his tusks were broken, so that kind of explains why he might have had that slur when he talked. So it kind of brings in, not everybody's perfect too, so the more that disability type of side for it as well.
Interesting. That's something I've never heard before. So
Yeah, me neither.
definitely a new take on something that a lot of people might have overlooked.
So what about you?
I've kind of already said my stuff. Like I said, I think they did a great job with the characters they needed to. Qui-Gon Jinn was phenomenal as a Jedi. I kind of more want to, when we get into later on, where impact on the series. I think this episode 1 had more of an impact on the series than everyone realizes. With that, though, Rob might have a few things to say.
Well, no one's really talked about the bantha fodder in the room. Young Anakin Skywalker, and I've read that the Jake Lloyd, the actor who played him, actually regrets it, and in my opinion, this was more annoying than Jar Jar, to be honest. I found young Anakin to be worse than Jar Jar Binks. Just some of his lines were like corny and cringeworthy, and
Do you think it was the way he played the character, like his acting, or was it the lines he was given?
combination of the two.
Okay.
Or once again, as I was saying with Binks, maybe George was trying to make this character more appealing to children, because you really didn't get this kind of blowback on him from younger people who saw it. It's more the older people that have to deal with it.
Right.
That's true, but I also heard they auditioned like 60 different kids to play Anakin.
I don't want to jump ahead too much, but I know that during our discussion on how to watch the Star Wars movies, that there was a few people that said to skip this one.
Yeah.
I kind of can understand why. With the whole, Jar Jar Binks, some other stuff that happened in this, that young Anakin kind of isn't that interesting. And I mean, does this super contribute to the story as much as the other ones do?
I mean, Anakin's dialogue is kind of weak to begin with, so it'd be hard to play the part. I'm not bashing the actor. I'm just, I don't know. It was just a weak character for
what he is, for what he
for
became.
what he is to the whole series.
I'll agree with that. His characterization was pretty weak.
I would never skip this movie because when it shines, but have to get through the Anakin and Jar Jar Binks of the movie.
So I think we can discuss real quick the overall impact and what positive things this did to the series. And I think one of the biggest things that a lot of people do complain about is the Senate, how much of the Senate is shown and all this bureaucracy. Do I like seeing that in the movie? Not that much, but if you think about it this way, you're seeing why the Empire was able to become what it was. That this whole situation could have easily been dealt with in the Senate, and it wasn't, because of bureaucracy, because of trading behind the scenes, stuff like that was shown, to where somebody who was as corrupt as Sidious was able to rise through and become what he was, and that everyone accepted with glorious applause, mind you, in a later movie, the acceptance of a galactic empire. How this was able to be built. Another important thing in this is we got to see the Jedi actually, like actual Jedis.
Right.
Like the Jedi Temple, how Jedis interacted, the master-pupil relationship. This is stuff that had always been speculated on, and we kind of saw a little bit of in Empire with the Master Yoda and Luke, but it's something we never got to see, and it was sort of introduced and was very, a very well-done thing, in my opinion, to see that more fleshed out. Another thing that was very impressive was this was a huge moment for lightsaber fights.
Yeah.
I will say this. Hands down, this was the most epic lightsaber fight of like that you had seen. The other ones, I mean,
I think some of them might have been more emotion filled, but this was the prettiest one to watch.
it was something that you had never seen before. The other fights you had saw were, I mean, of course, looked like traditional sword fights. This looked like some mixture of everything. And that was, I think, a huge contributing factor to stepping up. You know, a lot of people don't like that it stepped it up that way. Some people do. I think this was a very unique way to see a lightsaber fight, and to also, very important, see how powerful the dark side is.
Yeah.
Because he was an apprentice and took on 2 Jedi Knights, and a Jedi Knight and a Jedi Master.
Yeah.
And was
Master.
master. Key word in that. Now, there is, of course, I kind of have a theory that maybe Qui-Gon wasn't exactly as good-hearted as he seemed, because he really pushed for Anakin to be, you know, but everyone else sensed all this darkness. He's like, no, make him go through. So
I always wonder, well, we'll get to that point later.
But I mean, he was a powerful master no matter what, and he was able to, I mean, he was killed by Darth Maul, and I mean, Obi-Wan kind of lucked out in a situation to get the upper hand. I mean, he was pretty much beat too. So I just think
Darth Maul had the higher ground.
He did, and somehow still lost. So that, I think, is very interesting and a huge impact on the series and of the culture to, you know, show how Jedis, you know, interacted, and that how powerful the Sith truly are in this world.
Part of the reason why it was so great when it came out is just because we did get to see a whole lot of things that we had always wanted to see.
Now, kind of jumping forward, and this is just me kind of spitballing here for a second, you guys can, I guess, if you want to jump in on this, it is interesting that the only enforcers the Senate really has are Jedi, and they aren't exactly, I mean, it seems like they'll do it for the Senate, but they aren't, they're kind of neutral bodies in it, which then leads, of course, to the creation of the the Grand Army of the Republic, the cloned army. Because if they had the cloned army, they could have sent the cloned army in to deal with this trade issue. But the Senate had nothing to really enforce their rules except for Jedi. And I mean, there's not that many of us to really enforce stuff. So that's interesting how that sort of leads
and they're
to
not
that.
really, they were
They're
not made.
peacekeepers.
Yeah, they're peacekeepers and they're not enforcers. So they can.
I mean, they of course do in the later movies
but
become
that's
generals.
not what they were made to do.
So that, I think, is a very interesting thing of how this contributed to the series, is that it allowed for them to be like, oh, well, we need an army. Or that when there was an army available to them, they were like, sure, let's take this. And also, it allowed for a lot of, I believe, planets, because as you saw, Naboo had fighters. Well, in the later movies, each planet doesn't have their own fighters. They use the Senate's armies to represent them and work for them, which, of course, when it becomes a galactic empire, it's not working for them. It's occupying at that point. So that's kind of an interesting, I think, thing of how you see where they're accepting this. They're like, yes, come protect us. Come make sure that, you know, this evil trade embargo can't happen on our planet.
And you see that a lot in the Clone Wars anime.
Yes, so that's
cartoon, not anime, but yeah.
Yeah, so that's I think an interesting thing of where you see why all these places were so willing to just be like, oh yeah, we're cool with this, and not many people are like, hold on a second, you guys are getting an army together that answers only to you. That might not be a good thing.
Right.
So that, I think, is a huge impact on the series that this has, that not a lot of people, I think, realize or, you know, even recognize. So that's why I think that this movie still is important in that aspect.
Yeah.
Pod race is cool, but it's kind of just it's an action scene, I feel, that's put in there to break up some of the stuff that's going on.
Well,
and it also, of course, introduces him as being someone who is a capable pilot.
It's kind of funny too, because you're seeing kind of piggybacking off of what you said about Qui-Gon.
Yes.
And he kind of does things that the normal Jedi doesn't do.
Yes.
I mean, the whole pod racing thing with him betting.
Well, betting and trying to use.
What I was going to say earlier was, what would Qui-Gon have done if Anakin hadn't won? Because it was established earlier that, like, not only had Anakin never won a race, but he had never even finished one.
Right.
So I always wonder, like, what would have
Watto's
happened.
body would have been in a sand dune somewhere with a lightsaber hole through him.
That's kind
Well,
of what I gather.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the other thing that's kind of interesting is the Jedi mind trick. I mean, I think we kind of have discussed this some other point, or we might not have yet. Is that really a good move to use? I mean,
It's deceitful.
it is kind of, I
Yeah.
think, a little dark-sidey to use.
Yeah.
Now, every time it's been used, it's
It's
for
that
the
fine line.
it's that benefit. But he kind of walked up. I don't even think he really. There was no lead up to it. He just sort of tried to do it almost immediately.
Yeah.
Like I said, once again, is Qui-Gon really on the side of good in this thing?
I mean, and if we can move on to themes.
Yes. Let's move on to themes.
I mean, kind of moving into a theme from talking about this is family and emotions.
Yes.
That's a huge theme in this movie. And if we want to discuss for a few minutes about emotions,
anger leads to
what
hate.
are the Jedi's not supposed to have?
Anger, fear.
Just emotions in general. They're really not supposed to.
Which is something that's interesting that I don't think ever. It's kind of discussed in the original trilogy.
Yeah. But it's just the whole thing with the relationship between Qui-Gon and Anakin. Why is he so hung up on this kid? You know, why does he feel so strongly about him? And, you know, like you said earlier, when he's fighting with the council to want to train him, why is it so important? Like, he has a lot of emotions that he really shouldn't be having if he's a Jedi Master. Because I feel like it's clouding.
Because everyone's probably sitting there focusing on Anakin's emotions, and they're not seeing that Qui-Gon's having just as many emotions.
Yeah, so that's kind
But
of
also
something you
the
have to think
council
about.
sort of has emotions too, because they fear that if this kid becomes trained, he
Yeah.
could fulfill a prophecy.
So yeah, there's a lot of fear in this movie.
Yes, this movie is displaying a lot of fear, I feel. Another interesting thing with themes is the whole Chosen One thing.
Yes.
This is something that kind of it gets under my skin, I feel, more than it should, because
Okay.
it's never established in the original trilogy that Anakin was a chosen one or was sort of a divine, supposed to be a divine being in it. I always assumed from what, and I'm sure that this is something that we'll bring up in the other prequels,
Okay.
from what Obi-Wan has said and what was kind of stated about the past, was that he was just a Jedi that craved power and sought out power, and that's what corrupted him. Whereas in this, he kind of is put with this mantle of being the chosen one. Also, there is a lot of other themes of other religions in here too, mainly Christianity with the whole virgin birth, technically. Because
Right.
you never know who his father is. It's never established. It's kind of implied that it came from the Force, and him being the chosen one is, I think, an interesting parallel between those two. Personally, I don't know. I mean, what do you guys think? Do you think him being the chosen one is important to the story or not, since it was never established in the original?
I could have done without it. The whole Destiny Chosen One storyline is kind of annoying to me at this point.
But I'm playing devil's advocate now too.
Right, yeah.
So I'm dealing in both right now. I'm Qui-Gon in this
Nice.
because
Well, for me, it's an interesting, just for the theory sake, just to kind of just think about, different ways and why they did certain things. I think it's interesting to think about.
yes.
Just because I think they're trying to hit home that even though this person is supposed to be the savior, so to speak, this chosen person, that they're not infallible. So they can.
He's tempted.
Yeah, he's kind of like with the emotions again. He's so strong with his love for his mother and his love for his people, and so I think that really. He feels too much pressure. I think that's the problem. They put him up so high that I think it's easier for him to fall. Because,
I think once again, the whole chosen one motif is something that is introduced in story after story after story throughout. So if you want to talk where inspiration came from this, you can go pick whatever story you want. There's
Right.
probably a chosen one in there. So that's kind of going with that theme of traditional storytelling. Also, with him being the chosen one, his fall from grace is that much more impactful then.
Yeah.
Do I like that it's there? No, I don't think it's necessary, but in the essence of knowing how stories are told,
I don't think it should take 3 movies to tell that story.
it's something that
I mean, that's my thing. Like, I agree with Rob. It's like, does it have to be in there? Maybe or maybe not, but like, don't take so long to draw it out.
don't scream on top of a mountain as there's lava all around you, yelling at somebody going, you were supposed to be the chosen one.
I mean, and speaking of the Christian narrative type stuff, what about Darth Maul? Do you think there's, because of the horns and the red and the black, the kind of the demonic type, he represents the devil sort of thing?
Here's the thing. Star Wars before this was always very cut and dry. There was the light and there was the dark. There is no in-between ground.
Right.
With this, there is the light.
But that's Anakin. He's both.
But that's the thing. And then you have the dark, and it's serious. I mean, I do see that correlation that they could have possibly done to make sure that this person is evil.
Right.
But it's that whole, in the prequel trilogy, it seems to be the light and the dark. It's not you're one way or the other. There's a line you can walk that sort of goes back and forth. Mm-hmm. Which once again then continues on in Return of the Jedi with Luke's struggle then of which way is he going. It's not you can't walk down the middle apparently in the Star Wars universe. You have to go one side or the other in it.
And if it's okay with you guys, I just had one more thing I wanted to quickly talk about as far as inspiration, like something that I think inspired some of the stuff in the movie.
Okay.
Is the Japanese culture.
Yes, that was very inspirational as well with the original trilogy too.
Yeah. One thing is Qui-Gon's little pony.
Yes. Also, Obi-Wan.
Yes. I'm sorry, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan.
Qui-Gon just has the long hair. Obi-Wan has that little rat's tail thing from behind the ear that all Padawans have.
And it's very traditional with the samurais. And you have that until you have earned your place, so to speak. And once, in the Star Wars way, it's basically that gets cut off once they've become, a full-fledged Jedi master.
I know this is something that comes later, but you actually see that ceremony in the animated. No, not the one on Cartoon Network that computer generated, but the one that was done by Dexter's Laboratory, the same people who did the Samurai Jack one.
Oh, I know you love that one.
You actually get to see the ceremony where Anakin is no longer a Padawan, and they slice it off.
And maybe we'll talk about that in one of the extra episodes.
I just wanted to mention it because I like that scene.
And also kind of to go back again with the Darth Maul.
Yeah.
The Japanese demons.
Yes.
A lot of them are very similar to that style.
Yes.
The color palette and just the way he looks is very inspired by Japanese demon type things.
And your guys' opinion on Darth Maul, he says little throughout the entire...
3 lines.
Okay, I was about to say, does anyone have like an actual...
It's 3 lines is how many he has in the movie.
He's just...
I feel his character is... Once again, the way they characterized him is so well that you don't need him speaking to know his...
And let's also remember at this
his
point...
motivations.
The only Sith Lords we've seen in Star Wars are Darth Vader and the Emperor. We've never seen a Sith that, flips around and moves quick.
Yes.
So watching the bad guy do that was impressive to see the first time you saw this movie.
And another thing quickly with inspirations and everything, I know that it's been pointed out in sort of the lore that Sith are normally more powerful than Jedi at a younger age because their path is through its corruption and through they gather strength quickly. As opposed to Jedi that take time and, don't corrupt the Force.
They're more refined and focused.
Yes. So that's the thing. They're supposed to be very much more reckless with power. So that's why he was able to do what he did against those two. But once again, it was seeing that for the first time was awe-inspiring, for a ton of people. And I think still is to this day to see that as, being a very, in my opinion, a benchmark for fights in the series.
Yeah.
With that, we're going to move on to, I guess, open discussion, which is just kind of doesn't really fit into these other categories. Might a little bit, but doesn't really. So I guess the first thing I'm going to say is midichlorians. Thoughts?
I guess I'm not really a fan of it, but I wasn't like one of those rage-filled people. Like, what I always thought is weird is like it later on in the prequel trilogy, it gets on to like Jedis aren't really supposed to have families and marry, so it'd be hard to like reproduce more Jedis if midichlorians are like a genetic type thing.
That is interesting. How it never really. I mean, it seems like the Force kind of It once again. This is why I feel the Force should be. I'm just saying. I feel the Force has been established in Rogue One and the other series as more of the ethereal sort of, the intangible, like you can't measure it sort of thing.
I'm almost waiting for one of the Star Wars movies to write that off, like, oh, well, scientists discovered midichlorians have nothing to do with it, actually. That was just an ancient theory, or, some, like...
It could be some...
right away line to, like, throw the midichlorian thing out the window.
I guess it's them sort of explaining why, like, droids and stuff can't use it, maybe. I personally... The midichlorians, for me, it's kind of a throwaway thing. I kind of accept it as the Force works through people. And it doesn't matter what your midichlorian count is, which I'm sure we'll bring up later in possibly a Rogue One discussion on how the Force may work. Right. Because it's obvious that after the fall, the Force is kind of gone from the universe, but you got to imagine people are still being born that might be Force sensitive. They're just not able to hone that skill because they don't have schools to go to or people seeking them out.
Either that or there's just no more Jedi or Siths to produce anymore.
Well, the other thing is maybe the Force is something that can knowledgeably take itself out of the universe if it needs to.
Maybe somebody later kills all the younglings.
Dun, dun, dun. But yeah, I mean, that's just something I just wanted to mention because I know a lot of people get irritated by midichlorians. And my final thoughts will kind of explain this, I think, a little bit better. My opinion is, I heard it, I nodded to it. Do I accept it, in my opinion, as a thing that has to be law in this? No, because it's kind of written off later, I think, on its own, personally.
That's an interesting thing to think about. And here's another interesting thing that I've thought more recently about the past few times I've watched episode 1. Okay, so unfortunately for Anakin and his mother, they are slaves.
Oh.
You already know where I'm going.
Yes.
So these two unfortunate people happen to be slaves on Tatooine. And I just want to point out, Padme, Jar Jar, and Qui-Gon all go to Anakin's...
And R2.
And R2 go to Anakin's little apartment, house, whatever, in Tatooine. Which isn't a mansion, but, it's the size of a decent living establishment.
2-bedroom apartment, give or take.
Anakin's mom is able to feed herself, her son, and all three of them.
All of them. They have that big dinner scene.
Somehow, while being a slave, Anakin has the free time and resources to build his own Podracer and create C-3PO.
Doesn't he build 2? Because doesn't he have another one that he wrecked? Or is that somebody else's? I can't remember.
For some reason, I think that was his master's. I don't know. If you're curious, go back and watch the movie. But
it's like a one-line thing where it's mentioned that he crashed one of them.
For the sake of this, though, Anakin is a slave with the free time and resources to build a Podracer and C-3PO, and his mom is able to feed all of them and have her own living establishment. So I think I've come to the conclusion that slave wages on Tatooine are better than minimum wage in America.
And now we get political.
That's all I'm gonna get. That's all I'm gonna say. I gotta throw it out there.
Well, I mean, That's kind of is an interesting thing, but you brought up a very good point. We haven't discussed what this entire series actually is about. The dynamic story of two droids making their way through all these nights and wars. Yes, the actual story of Star Wars is C-3PO and R2-D2 making their way through this entire thing.
That's fine with me.
Nobody on that one? Okay.
Eh,
I just wanted to throw that out there because that's something that a lot of people have pointed out. That this story is actually about those two droids. There's also another thing to where the entire prequels are being told by R2-D2. So that's why midichlorians exist.
I've heard that theory, but I've heard it from you.
Yeah, I know. It's just something fun to watch the series and think that it's all being told as a droid.
So
From a droid, sorry.
Right, yeah.
one thing I'm just curious, how do you guys feel about the droid army?
Yeah, go ahead.
Here's the thing. They seem very capable in the first movie. Very capable. And I know that the TV series is for kids, but they seem like this very incapable force sometimes.
My whole thing is having droids in an army just doesn't really work for me. Like,
What about having clones?
at least clones are people. Like it just seems like if it's that easy to like manufacture a soldier, why use people for any type of army in the first place? Like, yeah, sure, all you have to do is blow up a thing in space and the whole army loses power. But still, like, you're saying they have the ability to just build droids that'll fight, but we never see them again at any point.
You kind of actually do. There's a bounty hunter that's in Empire that's a droid.
Yeah, but you still never see, like, another
Plus-
droid army because they'd rather just sacrifice people.
If I remember correctly, in some like thing that's supposed to be still canon, the Empire outlaws the creation of battle droids by anyone that's not the Empire after he takes over.
Yeah, I just think the whole battle at the end between the Gungans and the droids would have a little more stake if it were... I mean, I know, like, the droids are the bad guys, but it's still just like, you guys are killing machines.
Speaking of the battle at the end of the movie, there is another... Now, we're just getting into kind of fun theory talk real quick. There is a theory that Jar Jar was supposed to be the actual Dark Lord, or an actual, Dark Lord of the Sith, because of his supposed drunken fighting style he used.
I've heard this. Anyone who's curious about it, there's loads of videos on YouTube.
Bingo. Ellie, your thoughts on this?
On which part?
Oh, just the fact that that he was originally supposed to be possibly written as a Dark Lord, and that was actually him. His clumsiness is actually him disguising himself, just like Yoda did.
A big part of this theory is that he gets the Chancellor to full power.
Which does happen, but here's the thing. I think much like this whole thing's being told from the droid's point of view, there's another thing that says to watch the movie and just imagine that Obi-Wan and Padme have a relationship going on during the entire time. Because it does line up. It's just kind of one of those things that
makes Obi-Wan's like confrontation towards Padme about Anakin being the father completely different in the third movie.
It's one of those
He's the father, isn't
It's just one of those things to where I feel it makes the movies. It's something. I mean, yeah, there's stuff there, but I don't think it was ever intended.
Just wait to see an episode of Mari with Anakin and Obi-Wan.
Like I said, these are fun things to, I guess, theorize about. But I mean, I personally don't put too much weight into them. They're fun as like a thought exercise, but as an actual, this is law. No, I'm not real big on it.
I saw the video on Jar Jar, and for about 2 hours I was convinced, and then not so much.
Your thoughts on all these alternative theories and...
I'm not a big theorist.
All right.
Yeah.
Buzzkill
sorry.
Ellie.
I know, I'm sorry.
So I guess final thoughts on the movie now.
The story is not bad. I like the pod racing scene. It was a nice little way to throw a good action scene in the middle, make it relevant to the plot, and show some of Qui-Gon's recklessness, show why there's more to Anakin than his cheesy lines. So, and of course the lightsaber fight at the end is classic. There's plenty about this movie to nitpick and tear apart, but I watched it earlier today, and I was entertained by it still.
Ellie, your thoughts?
Kind of a lot of similar ones. Like I said, I don't think you should not watch it. So I do disagree with the people that think you should just completely omit this one. Because I think it does have some stuff that needs to be seen. Like Rob said, there's other stuff that really doesn't need to be in there, but I think it's entertaining enough. I like the way they kind of to set up the strong female presence in it from the very beginning, and you can kind of see where Princess Leia might have gotten some of her, attitude and her feistiness from her mom. So I think there are a lot of good points to it. It's not the best one, but it's good enough.
My thing is this. I'm not disagreeing with you by saying this, but I can understand where people come in with the machete method saying that they don't include this one. I can understand it. I'm not saying if I disagree or agree with it. For me, I don't mind watching the movie now because I can tune out certain characters saying Misa, whatever, or...
It's working!
Or yelling that too, or this is pod racing. I can tune that out and watch it for the story that I need to, for what you need to watch it to understand. Like I said, it's in my opinion, it's a necessary thing to watch if you want to get the full story. But I can understand if you admit it for certain reasons. So I guess that will wrap up our discussion on episode 1 today. Join us next month, of course, when we will do episode 2, Attack of the Clones.
Yes.
So that will be
wait. The political thriller of the Star Wars movies.
Yes, once again, we will get more into that and how that works. And of course, our opinions on that. If you guys want to tweet at us your opinion on episode 1, we would love to hear that. You can, of course, get a hold of us on Twitter at Zeng This. And you can also listen to if you want to listen to this podcast, you can, of course, find us on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, TuneIn, and Google Play. You can, of course, also find us on Facebook.
Zeng This.
You can find us on Twitter at Zeng This, as we already said. You can find us on Instagram at Zeng This Podcast. You can also find us on Twitch, where we play games as well, so you can check us out on there. And that's, of course, twitch.tv/Zeng This. If you want to contribute to the podcast, there's, of course, Patreon, where it's patreon.com/Zeng This. You can also email us directly,
zengthis@gmail.com.
And from all of us here at Zeng This, from Darth Zenger to
Viceroy Ellie
and Rob 2D2,
may the Force be with you. We'll see you next month.
Bye.
Play us out, DJ Golden Boy.